right. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I wish you guys can hear me and I'm audible enough. Can you guys hear me? Okay. All right. So today we're looking at the impact of relative clause in English. We are studying for Utme and we're going to look at different aspects of English language. And as of today, we are looking at relative clause. The issue of discussion today. Relative clause can be a features of language that give a description about the subject of the sentence, can either be the noun or the pronoun. But because relative clause embedded a lot of features like one, it talks about the issue of conjunction. Under the relative clause, we're looking at why conjunction is used. Do you understand? And this kind of conjunction, we're looking at issues of what subordinate conjunction. So what are the features of this relative clause that we have never get used to or we have never been told before? So that's the first thing we are looking at the features of relative clause as a relation to conjunction. The second aspect of a relative clause that we also be concerned today is to look at the impact of relative clause under comprehension. So there will be a time whereby we'll be given a passage to read and to answer some few questions like what is the grammatical names of this particular excerpt, probably extracted from an essay or a clause, or probably we look at the functionality of an essay extracted from an essay. What are the features of this? We're looking at relative clause in relation to this as well as in comprehension. The third aspect of today we'll be looking at under the relative clause is to examine the function of subordinate conjunction. Subordinate conjunction. So now, when we were told, I said subordinate clause rather, when we were told what is known as clause in secondary school, or probably when we were prepared for JAM class, we remember that we were told that a clause is a group of words with a finite verb. But here, many of us struggle with how to differentiate between main clause and subordinate clause. So you ask yourself, how can I know that, okay, this is a main clause and this is a subordinate clause? All these features is related to what is known as what? Relative clause today. At the same time, under the function of this subordinate clause, we'll be looking at the aspect of adjectival clause and adverbial clause. Now, can you see that this relative clause is more detailed than just looking at relative clause as a case of this in the word WHO, WHOST, WHICH, WHEN? It beyond that. So because of that, we are looking at the aspect and the issues of relative clause in other aspects of English language, from the point of conjunction to the point of comprehension to the point where we look at the subordinate clause, and at the same time look at the functionality of adverbial clause and adverbial clause. Are we together? Okay. So because of that, we move on to what is known as relative clause together. I guess our tutorial will be sharing our slide with you guys as I'm going on. So the aspect of a relative clause is a kind of a dependent clause that modifies a noun or a noun phrase. Take note of the word noun and a noun phrase. Emphasis on that. Noun and noun phrase. By now, you should know the difference between what is noun and a noun phrase. Noun is just a name of a person. It can be an identity of an event, incident, or a place or a state. At the same time, we are looking at a noun phrase. We're looking at a group of words, both the noun as the head word and other modifiers, such as we have pre-modifier and post-modifier. For example, under the noun phrase, we're looking at a case where we have a boy. A boy is a noun phrase. Some girls is a noun phrase. So when we're looking at the noun phrase, we're looking at noun himself with other words, modifiers. So here we have A as in an article, where we have the article modifiers, and here we have the determiner. But we are not moving on to that. I'm just giving you the function whereby this particular relative clause functions. So the work of a relative clause is a dependent clause that gives further explanation about the noun or a noun clause. For example, let's look at this example together. Let's take note of this example together. For example, if you have a sentence like the book was interesting. No, the first thing you ask yourself is that, what kind of book are we talking about? When you're talking about the book, a book can be a pamphlet, can be a book, can be a journal, can be a novel, it can be an exercise book, it can be 16 or 40. It can even be a textbook, a dictionary. They are all kind of books. But here, we need a further information about the kind of book we are looking at, which was what interesting in the book. And then we can have by saying the book that you lent me was interesting. Can you see that the aspect of what relative clause? So the function of a relative clause, as I said earlier, is that it is a kind of a dependent clause. That is, it is not meaningful on its own unless it is added to other clause in a sentence. It is not it is not independent, it is not a whole bunch of information. Yeah, it is meaningful on its own, but cannot stand as a whole information. It has to be added to additional information. And in this case that we have, the book was interesting. But what kind of book that is I'm talking about? Then I said, the book that you lent me was interesting. So the emphasis on that you lent me there gave us a notion of what's known as what relative clause. So, like I've given the definition of relative clause earlier. A relative clause is a dependent clause that gives a further information. All right, then move further also. Now, when you're not looking at this relative clause, what are the things, what are the attributes of relative clause? For me to identify a relative clause in the sentence, we have what's known as WH issues. WH issues are words that begin with WH, such as who, whom, which, whose, including the neutral one known as that. Now, take note, that is part of this relative clause. Do you understand? But the problem is that that is a neutral relative agent. That is, it can be in the sentence and it can be removed from the sentence. For example, the book that you lent me was interesting. I can decide to remove that by saying the book you lent me was interesting. Do you understand? So which means that here is neutral. So take note of that. Is neutral. It means it can either be added or omitted. Now, apart from this WH for the noun, we have other relative words too as an agent. Words like WHEN and WHERE. These are all words you need to look out for when they ask you what are the relative clause in this sentence. Take note first. Words that begin with what? WH, WH, WH. At the same time, also we're looking at the adverbial words like when and where. Are we together? In addition, also, do not forget that that is also part of the relative agent. But the problem is that is a neutral relative agent. Neutral means it can either be added or omitted. Take note of that. Because there will be a part whereby I will ask you, I will give you an example. I said, the book you lent me was interesting. Underline the relative clause there. You will ask me, I say, Mr. Kunle, I'm so sorry now. There is no who, there is no which, there is no when, there is no where, there is no whose, there is no that, there is no relative. There is a relative clause because that there is a neutral relative clause. That is, it can be there or invisible. In this case, if I remove the that here become an invisible relative agent. I can have the book you lent me was interesting. You ask yourself, it's not a meaningful sentence. It is a complete and meaningful sentence. So that is on that notion of that. Now, we move on further to the description. We move on further to other information that we need to learn. All of you guys are taking notes as I'm writing it down. Okay? All right. So we move on further to other features that we need to learn when we are considering relative clause. What are the features you need to learn out for? First and foremost, take note that all this relative clause that we have here is further divided into two. The form of relative clause is divided into two. The first one is known as what? Restrictive relative clause. Restrictive and non-restrictive. Now, when the word restrictive doesn't mean what? It means it is obligated. Restrictive relative clause means that particular relative clause is needed in the sentence. That is obligated. It is needed. It is part of the sentence. When it is removed from the sentence, the sentence becomes incomplete to the sentence. Are we together? But when you're looking at non-restrictive, just like the word and opposite, it means this is what? This is an optional relative clause. Optional. It means that what? It is either we put it there or we removed it. So take note of the two functions too. You see a sentence like this. Let's look at these two sentences together before I move further. Let's look at these two sentences together. Then you guys will know, you take note of what I'm saying about the features and the form of relative clause. The first one here, take note of these two words. The first sentence goes thus. A, my brother, comma, who lives in New York is coming to visit. That is sentence A. Sentence B. My brother who lives in New York is coming to visit. If you examine these two sentences very well, the first thing you will take note is that the first one takes a pair of comma. There's a comma here, and there is a comma here. While the second one has no pair of comma. What does that mean? When we are looking at restrictive and non-restrictive relative agents, take notes, restrictive relative agent and non-restrictive relative agent. We are looking at the kind of relative agent that need to be part of the sentence under restrictive. While non-restrictive means the kind of agent that either can be there in the sentence or be omitted from the sentence. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard the word apposition. When we are looking at the position of a word, a noun in a sentence, I don't know if you guys have heard the word apposition before. Apposition means when an additional information is added to a sentence, and at the same time, this give us a few minutes. We have this kind of bad network connection. Just give us a few minutes. All right, we are back. All right, sorry about that. So I was explaining the word apposition. I said, if you remember, we were taught apposition in secondary school that when we are having a pair of comma in a word, for example, Shegun, let's say you have Shegun is, Shegun to be bad boy. You say Shegun, bad boy, is here. In this case now, Shegun is also known as what? Bad boy, yes or no? Yes. So because of the use of pair of comma here, it means I can do away with the bad boy. I just say Shegun is here. That is the same thing that is happening with the one that takes a pair of comma. The one that takes a pair of comma, let us understand that this kind of relative agent is not restrictive because of the pair of comma. So take note, when you are given a sentence and they ask you, now, what kind of sentence is this? Is this a restrictive relative agent or non-restrictive? The first thing is look out for if there is a pair of comma. The kind of agent is what? Non-restrictive because it can be removed. The pair of comma, let us understand, it is optional in the sentence. So which I can just say, my brother is coming to visit. That's just it. But in the case of restrictive, there is an absence of a pair of comma. So in this case, I need to include this statement in this sentence. Are we together? So the essence of these two is very different. It's very, very distinctive. The first one is the one that is known as non-restricted. It means it comes with a pair of comma. And when you see a pair of comma, like my brother, comma, who lives in New York, comma, is coming to visit. Who lives in New York? Because there's a pair of comma. Pair means two. Take note of that pair. One here, one here. It simply means that particular the relative clause can be removed. Remove it in the sentence and you have a complete information. But in the case of restrictive, it means I need this information for the audience to understand the kind of person that is coming to visit. Do you understand? It's just like an emphasis here. I can say, my brother is coming to visit. Probably I have a single brother. Do you understand? I can just say my brother is coming to visit. You all know that only one person I have as my brother, so you understand. But in this case, you have a case of like, you have like 6 brothers, and you are saying, my brother is coming to visit. People will ask you, which one of them? Who? Is it your eldest brother? Is it the younger brother? Is it Femi? Is it Kunle? Is it Shola? You need to specify. So specifying here means we need to use restrictive relative clause by saying, my brother who lives in New York. Emphasis on that. So this who lives in New York without a pair of command, let us understand the importance of the relative restrictive agent. Are we together? Are we together? Please, can you just unmute so that if they are together, you can. I just want to get them. Are we together? So please, just for me to know that I'm not speaking to myself alone. If you are together, just say hi. If you have any question before I move further, you have like 3 minutes. Please unmute them so that they can just respond. Thank you. All right, so I'll be expecting if you have any question, you are mute now. Can you just raise up your hands? We give you the audience. And if you all know that you all understood what I've said so far, Can you just give a thumbs up for me to understand? Okay, yes, we are together in the same field. Now, what are other features of relative clause? You will ask yourself, how can I differentiate between who, whom, which, whose, and that? That's the problem now. So here we are looking at the use of relative agents. Do not forget that these are relative agents. Who is a relative agent? Whom, relative agent. Which, relative agent. Whose, that, when, and where. They are all relative agents. How do we use them? Most of the time, people know that which is majorly for non-living thing, inanimate objects. Yes or no? Yes. But in a case where we are looking at who and whom, many people cannot differentiate between who and whom. I don't know why, but it's very simple. When you're looking at the case of who, the who is always the subject of the sentence. That is, he is the doer of the action, while whom is the object of the sentence. That is the person who received the action. So we start with this agent one after the other. Let's start with the first one first. Let's start with the case of who. One, you want to look at examples here. Examples in the case of who. The first one is this. The man who is standing over there is my uncle. First question. I hope you guys are paying attention. The first question is, what kind of relative clause is this? Is this restrictive relative clause or non-restrictive relative clause? If you look at the structure on its own, first thing, look out for a pair of comma. Is there any comma here? Or restrictive relative clause, and it is important to be part of the sentence. That's just it. So the answer A has been given by saying the word who is standing over there is a restrictive relative clause. Yes or no? Yes. Now, what kind of agent we have here? We have the agent of who. And what is the function of the who in this case? We are looking at a person who goes for a person, at the same time functions as the subject of the sentence. The man who is standing over there is my uncle. If you rephrase this sentence, what does it mean? The man is standing over there. So can you see? So the man then becomes what? The subject of the sentence. Take note of the use of who. It goes for a person, and at the same time function as the person who is doing the action. The boy who beat his sister died last night. Do you understand? In this case that we are looking at the doer of the action. Now let's go to the second part of this who. The use of whom. Use of whom. Let's go for the use of whom. For example, example 2. The lady whom we helped yesterday begged for mercy. Look at it. Whom we helped yesterday. The first thing, ask yourself, is this a restrictive or non-restrictive? It's still restrictive because there's no pair of comma. But in this case now, there's a contrast between who and whom. Look at this. The man who is standing over there is my uncle. What kind of agent here? We are looking at the subject person in this agent. That is, the man here is the one doing the action. The man is standing. But in the case we have here now, we are looking at the use of whom. The lady whom we helped yesterday begged for mercy. In this case, we can refer by saying we helped a lady. Can you see? So we helped a lady. So are you able to understand the difference between who and whom? Difference between who and whom. The first one, the man who is standing over there is my uncle. My uncle is standing over there. Can you see? We rephrase the step by saying, my uncle become the word, the subject of the sentence is the verb standing over. Standing over, we have the phrasal verb. Yes or no? Phrasal verb. But in this case now, the lady whom we helped yesterday begged for mercy. We can rephrase the sentence by saying, we helped the lady. We helped the lady. Can you see? So in this case now, we become the subject, I become the verb, the lady becomes the object. So because the lady here is the person you are referring to, what do we use? The whom. So can you see the difference now? It's very clear, very, very audible now. That who is mostly for the doer of the action, while whom is the receiver of the action. So sometimes if they ask you to underline, they can say, okay, in this particular sentence, underline the object of the sentence. What do? Paraphrase, that is, rephrase the statement. By the lady whom we helped yesterday begged for mercy. What happened? We helped the lady. Yes or no? So when you rephrase the statement, you'll be able to get who is the doer of the action and also who is the receiver of the action. That's just it. Very simple. All right, we'll move on to the next agent in this course. We'll move on to the next agent. Are we together? Okay, all right. Thank you. I can see that you are together. All right, good. It shows that we are together. Shows that I'm not teaching only myself. Wow, okay. All right, we'll move on to the other agent in this sentence. What kind of agent is which? So let's go to more agents. Let's go to agents which. The laptop, which I bought online, arrived yesterday. The laptop which I bought online arrived yesterday. In this case now, do not forget, first thing, ask yourself, is it restrictive or not restrictive? It is what? Restrictive, because there is no pair of comma. But if I decide to just put this here and put here, you understand it's what? Non-restrictive. It means I can do away with that. Yes or no? Good. Now, which I bought online arrived yesterday. What is the function of the which? When you look at the doer of the action on its own, the laptop, we can see the laptop belongs to the world, a non-living thing. So in this case, which as a what relative clause agent was with non-living thing at the same time function with what? An animal. So probably you want to talk about an animal. For example, I say the cat which I bought online arrived yesterday. It's still the same. Can you see? So which means non-living thing and animal is majorly used for what? Which. Now, ask yourself this question. When who function as the subject of the sentence, whom function as the object of the sentence, both of them work for person. What about which? Where is the subject of which? And where is the object of which? Which function for both object and subject. That's just it. So when you have the subject of the case, you have the object of the case, which is what is used for, as long as it's a non-living thing and animal. Are we together? Yes. Good. So that's what we are looking at, the use of which. It is majorly for non-living thing and animal. That is the third relative agent. Don't forget, the first relative agent is who, which is majorly for a person, but it works for the subject of the sentence. Whom works for a person, but function as the object of the sentence. The third one is which function for both subject and object of a non-living thing and animal. Take note of that very well. So because of non-living thing, the laptop here, we're going for which. Are we together? Good. We move further. We move further. We move further. We need to other agents. We need to other agents that we have here. The projects that we are working on is due next week. Now look at this agent very well now. The agent is what? That. Is it restrictive or not restrictive? You need to emphasize to that issue. You know by now that this is restrictive. Now, do not forget at the beginning of the class I said the use of that is a neutral relative clause. That is, it can either be there or not there at all. It is neutral. And that's why in this case now, as a neutral relative agent, we can actually just decide to just probably remove it or put it there. If you remove it, we having the project we are working on is due next week. Can you see it's complete? And at the same time, I said the project that we are working on is due next week. In fact, if you take note of your speech very well, you tend to understand you use that more than other relative agent because it is neutral. That work for both non-living thing and a living thing. It works for a person, it works for a non-living thing, it works for animal. It is neutral. It works for everything. So it's as neutral as its case. So it can function in any form. That's just the function of neutral relative clause. So that here, like I've said earlier, function for both non-living thing and a living thing, and at the same time work for a person. But because we don't reference this, why? Because it's neutral. Many people don't use it. In fact, in terms of our speech, we tend to do away with the use of that because without the that, your sentence is complete. And with the use of that, your sentence is also known as what? It is complete. All right, we'll move on to the use of whose. When we're considering the aspect of whose, the house, example, the house whose roof was damaged in the storm needs repair. The house whose roof was damaged in the sun needs repair. Now, the relative agent we have here is known as whose. And the functionality of this whose is to take note of the use of possession, ownership. So in this case now, we are looking at where does this roof belong? So the house whose roof was damaged in the storm needs repair. So this roof belongs to the house. Do you understand? So the case of whose is to show the ownership of something. The girl whose mother was killed last night. So which means the mother belongs to the girl. In this case, the roof belongs to the house. So whenever you are using whose, it's not just the general form of saying how you use whose. Take note of how you use them. Whose is majorly for possession. So you want to indicate that this particular thing belongs to this social person. This particular thing belongs to this particular thing. What you need to do is to do what? Is to use of whose. Like an example, the kennel, whose the dog, whose kennel was damaged last night, cried bitterly. The dog, whose kennel, can you see now? So which means the kennel belongs to who? To the dog. So that's the functionality of the use of whose to show the case of possessions that I belong, this thing belongs to me. So in this case now, the kennel, no the kennel, the house where the dog lives, that's the place where we are looking at that shows the ownership of everything. Now we now move further to the complex state of this relative clause. All you guys are writing or jotting down. Are we together? Thank you. All right. So move on to the complex one. We'll be looking at the use of when and the when and where. How do we use the when and the where in this case? The use of where. Let's start with the use of where first. The use of where. The house where I grew up is now a museum. Museum. The house where I grew up now, where I grew up is now a museum. So in this case now, where I grew up is the relative clause. And the case of the where here, automatically, and do not forget I said when and where under this case of what? Adverb. Let us understand the functionality of relative agent. So in this case now, imagine you are given a sentence and they ask you, what is the grammatical name and what is the grammatical function? Can you see the difference now? So in this, the use of adverb under the same relative agent. So the use of adverb under the relative agent, we're looking at when and where. So for the case of where, we're looking at the place where the particular things happen. The house where I grew up is now a museum. All right. So that is another case of the relative agent. All right. To the final agent, we should be using as a case of early the class today is the use of when. The time when we arrived was midnight. The time when we arrived was midnight. When we arrived here indicates the number of what? The time. Qualifies the time. That is the name of the actions. So qualify the time here as in the case of what time. So where we are having when for time and where for place, it is important to note that they can also be used to qualify a noun or a noun phrase. So going back to the beginning of the class where we said that a relative clause is a dependent clause that gives further information about the noun and the noun phrase. It does not only restrict to only which, who, whose, whom, and whose. Then further we can use when and where at the same time. Is that taking? So that is what we're having for today. So I'll be giving you more classworks. I've said the more classwork is going to be sent to you guys to identify all the relative agents in the sentence. Identify them very well. Try to know the difference between restrictive and non-restrictive. At the same time, know how this particular relative clause functions. Don't forget that not only whose, because many people will be telling me, Mr. Pule, the last time you came to our class was only you mentioned who. Let me rub the ball so that you guys can see very well. Mr. Pune, the last time I came to our class, the only thing you explained is you talked about all the relative agents you mentioned is who, which, whose, and that. Do not forget that I added two more. I said when and where. These are all relative agents. But the case of relative agent here is because they function as an adverb in the sentence. But here all talks about this one talks about the word. The subject of the person, the subject of the sentence. So yeah, subject of the sentence. Here, this is the object of the sentence. Take notes. I'm giving a recap. This is non-living thing, an animal. An animal. This one talks about possession. And like I've said earlier, that is a neutral state of relative agent. This one go with place, and this one go with time. So I'm going to put a pause here. While you guys, if you have any question, please just open up for them. If you have a question, time for question, please. I'm here for a question. If you have any question, probably observations or so one thing or the other is not clear, it's time for you to ask a question before we call it a class. What is apposition? Remember, I said that the word apposition is when we have additional information about a noun or a noun phrase that is enclosed in a pair of comma. Enclosed. Take note of the word enclosed. Enclosed means it is covered. For example, I said, let's say the boy is my friend. Imagine that you have this sentence on your screen. It's a complete sentence, yes or no. But I want to give further information about this boy. But at the same time, I don't want the information to be too restrictive. Take note of the word restrictive. That is, I don't want it to be important to be there, but I just want to reference that information. Then I need to put that information in a pair of comma. That is, comma at the beginning and comma at the back of the word. So I can have the same by saying the boy. Let's say you give your friend Bado, the boy Bado, comma, is my friend. So in apposition means when you're giving additional information about a noun or a noun phrase, but at the same time, it's put in what? In a comma. Comma at the beginning of the word and comma at the back of the word. That's just it. So when I said now in apposition, not only we have been told that there's what is called now in apposition. That is, we are looking at now that's put in a pair of comma that is not restrictive. Take note. It's not important to be there, but just a reference. So when you put something in a pair of comma, what you are telling the reader is that this information is not restrictive. You can either do away with it or read it like that. But if you don't put a pair of comma, I'm saying, Baba, read this thing. you have to be read, you understand? But when you put them in a pair of comma, you're telling the person to reference. So apposition is when you reference an information with a close pair of comma at the beginning and at the end. I think I've answered that question. All right. There's another question again, please. I'll see here. So I think no more question because I hope you guys really enjoyed the class where you were just communicating with the person who is at the back of the camera, connecting the technology and every other stuff. So like I said earlier, do not forget that the essence of the relative clause is for we to understand that relative clause is an additional information to the noun and the noun phrase. But in this case, it's not just one word, it's a complete clause. Just a complete clause, and it is dependent. Do not forget, I said it's dependent means it cannot stand on its own. It is there and it can either be restrictive or not restrictive. Thank you very much.